Hi, I'm Gabe from One Debate. And if you've been following along with our podcast, you know that episodes 2 and 3 went over character creation. In this video, I will be going over how to use my method to create a character. So if you could just follow along. Now, I'm using D&D Beyond to do this. It is not a must. You certainly don't need to follow along with any of my resources. You can even make your own or find some tables online that work for you. However, the tables that I am going to be referencing, you'll be able to see on the screen here with me. This is your life segment in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, one of the recent Wizards of the Coast 5th edition books. And by recent, I guess I mean a couple years old. However, barring that, we're going to be just doing some dice rolling, taking some notes, and creating a character. So let's dive in. So we are going to start, of course, with an origin. And the origin of parenthood is probably the place to start. Just with the book, we're just going to follow right along. So we're going to roll a D100 as suggested. We have 83. So close to not knowing our parents, but that's a 1 to 95. So in most cases, you are going to know who your parents are. So we're just going to make a note. We know our parents. Next, you can scroll down and you need to roll a D8 for your parental state. 2. So one parent was an elf and the other is a human, which is interesting. I guess we're a half elf if we follow through with this. Never mind, that's for half elf parents. So of course one parent is a human. That's got to get deleted now too. Oh boy. Oh boy. So, we know our parents, and we need to decide what our race is. And this is something that you probably should have in mind before creating your character. But if you don't, it's not a big deal. You can scroll down the page and come up with a couple of different kinds. There's half elf, half orc, and tiefling, because those are the specific races that obviously one portion is a specific race. If it's a half elf or a half orc, they're usually a human and a half orc as well, or a human and a half elf. And the tiefling race sort of originates uniquely. It's a heritage, as it says here. It lies dormant, or it can, of course, be a direct descendant to a devil. So we are going to just have to make a choice here on what our race is. And this should probably be something that you know. So for the sake of this, we're simply going to go with half elf. And we're going to roll a d8. And we get a 4. So one parent was an elf and the other was a human. We're going to mark it down. And then we're going to scroll down to birthplace. And this is where the tables start to get a little bit more fun, a little more interesting. And they're going to give you some unique options. And so to reiterate, if you've listened to the podcast, you know that I will say, scan the list, look at the whole table, decide if you want to just choose one. Let's say you want your half elf to have grown up in a cave. Well, pick that. But for now, we're going to go through the whole table. We're going to roll our D100. We get 45. So we were born at home. That's boring. So I'm going to re-roll. $91. That should be fun. So we were born on board a boat or ship. That is interesting. Siblings. Now, siblings is, I like to have a couple siblings. The book gives you an opportunity to have a great many siblings. That can be good, that can be bad. It depends if your dungeon master really wants to seed a lot of relationships. If you have less fellow players at the table, more siblings might give more opportunity to plant these NPCs. So it can be really healthy. So I do like to still roll it, but it's more of a suggestion for me in how I decide. We got 10. I really don't want 1d8 plus 3. So I'm going to just I'll roll 1d8 and add 3. Okay, we have 6 siblings. Hopefully all not born on the ship at once. But maybe. Maybe they're all dead, because I don't want to deal with it, and that would be easier on my Dungeon Master. The birth order. Obviously a necessity after rolling that, so we're going to do 2d6. 5. So, we are older. Or perhaps the eldest. And of course, you'll see here, this also has options for twin, triplets, or quadruplets. And if that's something that you like, you say, okay, you've got 6 siblings. Maybe we were all born on a ship, or maybe I am a twin or a triplet, and that's half the siblings, and we were actually all born on that ship. That is going to lead to some interesting flavor. So we have supplemental tables next, and I find that these are good not to ignore. In fact, if you ignore these, you should just skip the whole process, because these are the fun ones, really. So here we're going to see what is our family. We're going to roll a d100. 24. So it looks like we were raised by paternal or maternal grandparents. Interesting. So technically that means we have an absent parent. So we are going to roll on the absent parent table, and we are going to see what that means. Parents disappeared to an unknown fate. They left for cigarettes. In many ways, this is sort of an alleviation. You don't have to come up with the typical cliche parental relationships that might be difficult or something that you want to avoid. Maybe your parents simply did disappear in the game, and this gives your dungeon master a chance to throw a fresh NPC at you, maybe halfway through the campaign, where your parent turns out to be alive now, and you're going to have some questions for that parent, which is great because we're seeding the flavor to our game already. Now, how did we live? 3d6. We lived with a 15. Comfortable. Now, these lifestyle callouts, wretched, squalid, poor, modest, comfortable, wealthy, aristocratic, they actually have a figure attached to them in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So you can Google these, and they will tell you basically how much money was being spent per day in your household to accommodate this lifestyle. So you're definitely, if you get something like wealthy or aristocratic, not only will the pluses on them influence future rolls here, but you're going to want to know how much gold did my family burn through in a year? Because you can look up simple things like a cow is worth, let's say, 10 gold pieces. And you think, okay, well, your average family doesn't own 10 cows, but maybe your family was actually burning through the wealth for a pretty large livestock farm in a month. That's going to take a part in how your character behaves, how they treat NPCs in the game. And this is where everything starts to shape together and take form and take weight. So we're going to mark that down. You lived a comfortable lifestyle. I will make note to check the DMG. We're going to check this next one. So notice the asterisk. That means that we are going to add the plus 10 to this. So D100 plus 10. Okay, so 47. So we had an apartment in a rundown neighborhood. Now that doesn't really add up, and that's okay. I'm going to run with it anyway. This might be a moment where you say, no, we grew up in a mansion. But, you know, there's some oddities to the backstory already taking form. I was born on a boat. Why was I born on a boat? Maybe my parents were on the run from something. So take the odd answers that you get, the ones that don't fit and start to use them as scaffolding to create that adventure. So we're going to scroll down, childhood memories, 3d6. 14. Okay. So we had several friends and a generally happy childhood. Not much going on there. We will keep that there and think about it in the future. Okay, so here is where background becomes important. Now, I have spoken a lot about backgrounds with Jacob, and I think that backgrounds are very important, and I think that the backgrounds that are supplied by Wizards of the Coast are fantastic. So we're actually going to shift over to a character creator, and we're just going to do a standard build. Pretty easy. I don't have a name yet. I'm just going to say half-elf. We will get to a name. And of course, this has some name generators, but not advertising for D&D Beyond quite. Going to go to the race. We know that I'm a half-elf. So we'll just go with half-elf. We know that there are ability scores, but we're going to worry about a lot of these things later. The mechanical side of the character isn't what we're focused on right now. So we want to go to backgrounds. We have a lot of backgrounds here. And this isn't something that has to be taking form yet. Maybe you have an idea. You wanted a sailor or something. Maybe I want to start taking from my backstory. Maybe I'll throw sailor in there right now because I was born on a ship. And this is all subject to change. We're going to mark it down and continue on. Sailor may not be in this list because oh, it is. Well, very good. Why did I become a sailor? Well, because it was in my backstory, but that's not a great answer to give your dungeon master. So we're going to go with 2. I wanted to see the world, so I signed on as a deckhand for a merchant ship. Starting by finding perhaps the captain of the ship I was born on, because why not? We're going to keep scrolling. Class training. Now, this is the point. I know most players are going to have their class in mind initially. I know I typically have my class picked before I'm creating my character. So this is going to be a little bit of a mixed bag. I'm just going to roll with Barbarian because it's the first choice, and it's a little bit peculiar for a half-elf. But I became a barbarian. Why? I became a barbarian because I was struck by lightning and lived. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to copy paste and move on. And there's, of course, all the classes here. And again, continue scanning the lists. Maybe even check out another list if there's something that doesn't fit. Right now, we're not trying to relegate ourselves to something, but we're trying to use these lists to give us a feel for a flexibility within a structure. So life events. This is where it gets fun. The longer you've been alive, the more life events you have. So again, if you have an idea for how old your character is, don't roll on this table. Just choose. I'd like to actually go a little bit older because I prefer multiple life events, but we're just going to continue rolling with the punches. 66. Okay, I am 31 to 40 years old. And that means I have had 1d6 life events. 4. Excellent. That's what I want to hear. And that means I have to roll on this life event table 4 times. And this is where things get pretty good. I keep saying that. I'm excited. 26. All right. I fell in love or got married. We're going to just do all of these right in a row. 3. I suffered on the tragedy, so I have to go down and roll on a tragedy table now, which is here, D12. Ooh, a 12. A current or prospective romantic partner of mine died. Well, that works pretty well. We're going to scroll back up. I have 2 more life events to roll. There we go, D100. 45. So, you made a friend of an adventurer. Use supplemental tables to work with your DM to add more detail to this friendly character. Now, this is something we're going to look at when we get there. I'm probably not going to roll up the NPC, but there, of course, are tables for that. And again, if you get a duplicate roll here, or if you get something you don't like, re-roll, or select something that you really like. You may have some ideas of what your character is already. I mean, we have a clear flavor taking place. I have this sailor background, was born on a ship. It's apparently a very romantic, young-ish individual who fell in with an adventurer. So, one more. But that could be indicative of my class. I perhaps should have selected Storm Sorcerer instead. And this would be the time to go back and say, okay, don't be a barbarian. Be the Storm Sorcerer that was struck by lightning, and you had an affinity for it. So 81. You had a supernatural experience. Roll on the supernatural events table to find out what that was. These are the best. They make me feel special. My supernatural experience was I woke up one morning miles from my home with no idea how I got there. Probably had something to do with the trauma from being struck by lightning. However, we're going to roll on. So here we have some supplemental tables. Now, these are almost better for a dungeon master. These are the tables that you would use to decide your alignment. I think your behavior should probably be chosen by yourself. But for the sake of simply continuing, we are going to do them. We have a neutral character. I'm not dead, but I'm going to roll it. Three. Was killed in battle. Well, that's not very useful for us, is it? Okay. These are for individuals who are part of your character's life. So these aren't for you at all. So it's pretty good that my instinct was to not roll them for yourself because you're not supposed to. Anyway, for the adventure, this would be where we roll it. Or the lover that has died, we would roll what was the cause of death of the romantic partner that died. And maybe we can say they were killed in battle. I would probably start to scan these and see if there was something that fits well. I'm very nautical as a character so far. Maybe they were killed by pirates or executed for a crime and tortured to death. Start to take these to the next level and say, well, why was she or he executed? And say, well, maybe they were misidentified as a pirate, or maybe they had thrown in with a pirate lot. And suddenly I am running Pirates of the Caribbean, but hopefully we have fun with it. So they have everything from relationship, their status in a society, and everything in between: race, occupation, class, age. Now, you might not want to roll on some of the tables. You might have an idea. You might think that leaving it unknown is for the best. And I think that that is perfectly fine. And that is it. That is the length of the table. We have rolled all of the information that we need. And now I'm just going to do a quick little review. We were raised by a grandparent. We have 6 siblings, hopefully which the DM doesn't necessarily want to do something with every single one of them. Or this is going to be a sitcom of a campaign. Maybe they all died. Your parents disappeared to an unknown fate. You lived comfortably with your grandparents in an apartment in a rundown neighborhood. Now, the apartment in a rundown neighborhood makes me think that perhaps they were fleeing from something because you were born on this ship. You have an affinity for the sea, but that doesn't mean that the sea has to necessarily dictate your childhood. Perhaps your family was running from the clutches of an evil warlord or a different society or culture that they were at work for, a government. Perhaps they disappeared one night because they knew secrets from the nation that was chasing them. And the government agent that came in and scooped them up was unwilling to kill you. And so we're just going to continue on. You had a relatively happy childhood, some friends. Now, the friends here, this might be a good opportunity for you to actually roll on those supplemental tables. Decide, how many friends do I have? Roll a d4 or flip a coin and pick one or two. And those friends, then you can start to build into NPCs that you can supply your dungeon master with, and perhaps they'll use them. We selected sailor background because that's really just how things were falling into our game. And so now I'm going to say I wanted to see the world. That's why I became a sailor. But our backstory is really starting to tell us why we wanted to see the world. We probably want to find where our parents went to. We want to find how and why they disappeared. We want to go to the enemy nation and figure out if they're still alive, figure out if our parents are still in existence. And on our way there, we were struck by lightning and we lived. We found a new strength within ourselves, and perhaps that's where the barbarian within us was birthed on the sea, just as we were 31 to 40 years ago. On the way, we fell in love or got married. I suppose the ship's captain could have married us to a crew member that we fell in love with, and then they died. So that's simple. Oftentimes, these aren't going to work out too well, but with a little bit of creativity and a little bit of flexibility, you start to manipulate the options and the roles to benefit the narrative that you're creating through this randomness. This prospective romantic partner died. Now, we should have gone down and rolled on the cause of death, which I did by accident, but we don't need to talk about that. And we rolled, they died in battle. So indeed, we were perhaps attacked by pirates. And we made a friend of an adventurer. Perhaps we captured one of those pirates. And in time, during this 3-month journey across the ocean, that captured pirate, who was involved in the death of our lover, became a great friend. So right there in and of itself, you have an adventure that occurred before the adventure is going to take place with your dungeon master. And these adventures, the way you interact with your family, the amount of money you grew up with, the relationships and events that happened on your way to your adventure, they should be changing who you view your character as. So even if you have a good idea of who you are as a player and as a character, you could benefit greatly from simply rolling on these tables to get some supplemental energy to your character. To continue, we woke up one morning miles from home with no idea how we got there. Maybe we forgot. Maybe we forgot the whole journey. Maybe I went to sleep one night while the journey was almost over, and I awoke on shore in this unfamiliar territory. Maybe you leave that up to your dungeon master to tell you what happened. Maybe you work with your dungeon master to find out what happened here. But these supernatural events could be the influence of the shadowy agent that took your parents. It could be the bloodline gift left behind by that sorceress origin that we discussed. Perhaps it is the gods and deities that controlled that lightning to strike you to begin with. This is where you just keep going back like a typewriter, hitting return, coming back to the beginning, re-reviewing, and seeing how these options flavor each other. So now that we have an idea of what our character is, or who they were, perhaps, we need to review. So, in the podcast, Jake and I discussed alignment being this fluid nature. And I have a little bit of a Venn diagram that I discussed briefly in the podcast, and this is it. And I'll incorporate this in the YouTube link. So if you scroll down, you should be able to find a copy of it if you'd like it. Basically, it's just a flow chart for me to keep in mind that my character should be ever changing, that the decisions that we're making throughout the campaign are going to change who I am. Now, we have done some things to roll up our wealth as a young man. Perhaps we can talk to our dungeon master and they'll allow us to bring a little bit extra starting gold with us. And I just like to posit what I am. I like to think, is my character going to be a hero? Am I an anti-hero? Am I neutral? Am I a villain? Am I undergoing some sort of a betrayal? Am I dealing with a betrayal of that lover from our backstory? Am I coming out of this with a redemptive quality in mind? Am I attempting to rekindle the relationship with my parents, or do I think that they have abandoned me? And one of the easiest ways for me to imagine this, when I just have the framework of a character, the barest concept, is to imagine what you do with some of those generic senses, the sensibilities like money and love and family. What do those things mean to you? So I will pull this out and I will think about what they mean to my character. And so far, our character is lost in a new land. He's got a bit of money to his name, but he has these new powers that have been given to him through this strike of lightning. He has no idea where his crew has gone. He has no idea if he's been abandoned. He wants to know. So curiosity and this wanderlust are really driving our characters. So now I'm going to ask myself, family seems to be important to me. Finding my family. Do I want to stray toward the role of the hero? Am I looking to safeguard them? Am I looking to return them to their home country? Or is this control? Is this a selfish desire? Do I want to clear my family's name and prove they are not traitors because I'm sick and tired of the way that I was depicted or looked at as a child? Do I want to do I believe that they were traitors to the nation? Do I want to kill them, to silence them, to bring proof back home that I've undone their treachery? Am I an anti-hero? Do I simply want to arrive in this new land and avenge them? Is that the simple goal? Do I view this other culture as evil? Do I need to do something about it that's drastic? So this is a good thing to reference, to think about your character as selfish or selfless, and or somewhere in between. And ask yourself, are you going through the motions of trying to redeem yourself to become more selfless or less selfish? Or are you trying to get out there and just wrong the right of your childhood, as so many young folk probably have misconstrued on their way to growth and development? I like to start somewhere at the beginning of either a redemption or a fall, because it gives my character a direction to grow. And having that direction and discussing it with your dungeon master should lead to storytelling that will unfold over time and blossom into something that is a growth and a collaborative creation. Because ultimately, what you want to do here is you don't simply want to win. You don't have a goal in mind that is, I want my character to assassinate the folks that stole my parents. Maybe that's the goal that you start with. But in time, perhaps your dungeon master wants to tell you, your parents left and they didn't want to. But turns out the nation that they left to was actually doing some good work. And as much as it pained them to give up on you, they had to. And then you have to come back to this chart and you have to ask yourself, do I want to have a selfish response to this? Do I want to yell at my parents and grab them and take them home with me in this newfound power I've been granted? Or do I come to terms and I accept this, and that this part of the journey has simply helped to grow a part of my character? So with that in mind, and with the discussions of your dungeon master, your MC, if you're playing something like PBTA, or simply discussing with other players at the table and deciding how you want to continue growing your character, perhaps within other spheres of influence, their spheres. You want to just continue to ask yourself, how do I continue to grow this character to have the most satisfactory ending? And finally, we are going to do the personality flaws, ideals, and bonds. Okay, so last but certainly not least, those 4 little boxes in the top right of your character sheet. Now on D&D Beyond, we can simply scroll over and take a look at this. We know we have Sailor, and there are other choices that we can utilize, but I would recommend you just stay with the background that you chose, at least for a start. And again, pick what you want, but what we're going to be doing here is randomly rolling, because why not? So, I randomly rolled, but I did not see what it was. So we're going to roll a d8 here. 3. I enjoy sailing into new ports and making new friends over a flagon of ale. Now, this doesn't fit our backstory well, but it does indicate our personality. So I would still copy it. I would still paste it in the spirit of simply choosing everything that I get randomly. Now, if you see another thing on this list, pick it. If you have an idea of what your character is personality-wise, you should simply choose that, I think. But this sort of indicates that when I arrived in this new town, I was happy to meet new people. I was, despite the nature of my quest and the fact that I was searching for a missing parent, or I was in dire need of figuring out where the hell I was, I know that I will make new friends over a flagon of ale. And that's going to give you a way to treat your adventure. You arrive in a new town, you head straight to that seedy tavern, and you look for someone to make friends with. Now, ideals. So we're going to roll a 1d6. 5. Neutral, as we have rolled earlier. People, I'm committed to my crewmates, not to ideals. So, having rolled that, perhaps now we know that another addendum to the quest is, where did our crew go? How important was that crew to us? Well, apparently it was very important. And being here in this new place with no knowledge of how we got here, we need to know what happened to our crew. Now, this is a point where I'd work with my dungeon master and I would say, hey, I think the crew probably got destroyed by that storm. Or maybe they were killed by the conspirators that have my parents. This is the point where we want to complicate our backstory through these roles. Bonds. 5. I was cheated out of my fair share of the profits, and I want to get my due. So we are seeing here that we are a fairly mercurial individual. We like making friends, but we really don't like being slighted. We make commitments to people, but those commitments can change, especially if we've been wronged. So perhaps we were cheated out of that inheritance. This would be a chance to get back to some of those siblings we have, because we have 6 of them, or we are one of 6. So with those 5 siblings, maybe they took that inheritance, and maybe you're just going to this new land to cry to your parents. I don't know. But that could be a great opportunity to create one of those siblings to become a rival that we can seed for a future point in our story. In the growth and development that's going to continue, we tell our dungeon master, hey, this happened, it's on the back burner, but 6 months into this campaign, if we could maybe look to resolving a secondary objective for my character, that would be great. And flaws, the big one. I can't help but pocket loose coins and other trinkets I come across. So we are curious, as we have sort of said. We like mementos. We like to hold on to things that are interesting, that ground us to a place, a memory, a possible connection to something. And this kind of fits with us missing our parents, needing the urge to find out what happened, to keep that memory close, to ground ourselves in the past history. And with all of those things, we are done with our soul-searching possible pirate barbarian of lightning. I'm Gabe, and this has been 1D Bait's bonus episode for character creation.